We ready? All right, so example 17. A criminologist discovered that the number of crimes committed per month in a big city decreased as the number of police officers, P, patrolling the city increased. Well, that kind of makes sense. The more police you've got around, the more crime decreases. After graphing her data on a number plane, she found the linear relationship. So cost, C is number of crimes. So number of crimes equals minus 3 times the number of police plus 3,250. So what's the independent variable here? What's the independent variable? You're all going to say the number of police is independent because the number of crimes here we're saying depends on the number of police. So what's the independent variable? P for police. Copy and complete this table for the equation. We definitely need some good calculator work here. Anyone want to try for this one? So 3,000, so what it's saying is basically use the equation to complete the table. So if there's 50 police, what's the number of crimes? 3,100 is about right, I think. If you had 150 police, how many crimes would you have? 2,800? Yep. If you had 200 police, how many crimes would you have? 2,650, nice. 250 police? 2,500. And lastly, 300 police? 2,350. Okay, now it's asking us to graph that on the number plane. So, we'll have our independent variable there on the x-axis, and let's have our dependent variable there on the y-axis. The other way to do this is to, because you've got a table, I could have done this with this last example, because you've got a table, you've got 5 points on this graph. So just like I taught you last week, if you choose 2 points on any line, you can graph it. So let's try and do it that way. Let's start with the point 50. So if we've got 50 police, how many crimes do we have? 3,100. We can put that at there. So that's 1 point. If we have 150 police, let's go up in steps of 50. If we've got 150 police, we've got fewer crimes. We're down here at around 2,800. Okay, and then you can join them up. And you get a sense of what the line would be on that scale. What's the gradient? What's the gradient of the graph you've drawn in part C, and what does it represent? Well, if you go back to the learning from last week where I said, well, the standard form of an equation is y equals mx plus b, you'll see that this looks almost exactly the same. The only difference is we've got c instead of y and p instead of x. So from there, you should be able to read the gradient here is the m, or that coefficient of the p. So the gradient here is -3. And what does it represent? Well, it represents, first of all, the slope of the line, but it also tells you that for every police person you put on the streets, you're going to reduce the crime by 3. So as police goes up by 1, crimes are going to go down by 3. What is the vertical axis intercept of the graph you drew in part C? The vertical axis, so the vertical axis is our C-axis here. All right, it's asking us, well, how many crimes would be committed if there were no police? So that's how you find the vertical axis intercept. You go to the 0 point there. So if P equals 0, how many crimes would there be? We can just plug that into the formula there, and we would see there's 3,250 crimes. So what does the vertical axis intercept represent? It represents the number of crimes that would be committed if there were no police on the streets. How many crimes are committed when 100 police officers are on patrol? So we take the value 100, we put it into the equation, and it would come out as
2,950.
So I'll just write it out in full. So we go C equals minus 3 times 100 plus 3,250, which is minus 300 plus 3,250, which is 2,950. All right, calculate how many police officers are required to reduce the number of crimes to 1,900. So here's where you're going to have to use some of your algebraic skills. It wants to know how many police we need to reduce the crimes to 1,900. So here we've got a value, that's a value for C. So we use the equation again, starting with 1,900 equals minus 3p plus 3,250. So here we use our algebra to solve that. This is probably, I think the first thing I want to do is get the p over here on the left-hand side. I'm going to do that by adding 3p to both sides, and that will give me 3p plus 1,900 equals 3,250. I now need to subtract 1,900 from both sides. Okay, so I get 3p on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, I'm going to get 1,350, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to divide both sides by 3. The 3's cancel. P equals, can someone quickly do that in their calculator for me? 450. So we find out that we need 450 police to reduce the number of crimes to 1,900. Thanks, Nate.